Hello, welcome to my October wrap up. And before I get into books read, I first want to talk about a few highlights. One being that my channel reached the 3K milestone in the month of October. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You all mean so much to me. I appreciate your support, your comments, your likes, your subscribes, and I don't know how else to express my gratitude, but thank you all so much. And then I also want to talk about some books I was gifted in the month of October. So one was The Severing Sun by Von Roycroft. And so this book was very kindly gifted to me from the author, and he left a very beautiful message inside. And this cover is gorgeous. I, of course, found out about this book through the cover reveal and fantastic review over on Philip's channel. And actually, Philip Chase is quoted in the beginning here with the blurb. So it is wonderful. So I am excited to get to this. I know that Philip talked about how when you read the book, you will recognize the characters on the cover. And it seems here that there is a huge cast list and also places, names, and glossary. So it seems like a lot of care went into this. This will be book one in a trilogy that's called the Sundered Nation Trilogy. I am looking forward to this, especially after Philip described the themes in the story and how it is very action-packed, that fans of, I think, John Gwynne of Westeros for George R. R. Martin's The Song of Ice and Fire series, and I think he said also Rage of Dragons will really appreciate the pacing, the action, and the dynamics between characters and themes that are presented here. So I'm very excited about it again, and thank you again to Von Roycroft. I'm looking forward to this. I forgot to mention that I received Kings of Paradise by Richard Nell earlier this month as well from the author, and this is book one in the Ash and Sand trilogy. I've heard fantastic praise for this trilogy. Thank you so much, Richard Nell. I love the blue cover, and I look forward to reading this. Next one to mention here was gifted to me from Evie, from She Was Only Evie, and that is Michael Moorcock's Elric Saga Volume 2. If you don't know, Evie, Sarah from Sarah Reads, Liam's Lyceum, and Andrew's Wizardly Reads and I are doing a read-along of the Elric Saga, and we're having a fantastic time. I'll talk more about Elric in my wrap-up when I talk about the books, but this particular book was gifted to me from her, and I'm excited because we're going to obviously continue on after Volume 1, and I'm enjoying the character of Elric. I'm enjoying Moorcock's writing again, and I just didn't expect this gift at all. So thank you. BookTube Santa is what I call Evie now, and I'm thrilled to receive this beautiful green covered book. I love this color, by the way. And then the other gift I received, which I was completely shocked, surprised by, I was on the phone with my mother, and I happened to notice a box had arrived from the Folio Society. And I thought, who, what, how? I have never ordered a book from the Folio Society before, and I knew this would be a big deal. So I opened up the box, and inside was this. And here it says, "What you don't wish for will always be beyond your reach." Well, honestly, I never even wished for this, and somehow it came to me. So I don't know, even wishes you didn't even know you had come true. I'll just put it that way. But the book that's actually in this is The Never Ending Story by Michael Ende. I love this book. This book has beautiful silver foil in the cover, and it also has the sprayed edges. And then we also open it up, and it has this interesting blue font, blue and sort of brownish font. And it also has some illustrations that are in sort of like a bluish print. But then it also has these gorgeous illustrations. Let me show you if I can find one. These gorgeous colored illustrations. This is absolutely stunning. I didn't know who sent this to me, and so I sent out the message on Instagram stories asking whoever sent it to me if you could let me know. And then I thought to ask Evie, BookTube Santa, and sure enough, it was Evie and Sarah from Sarah Reads. They both teamed up and decided to gift this to me, and I just got so emotional. I was already emotional. When I opened this up, I promise my heart felt like it was beating out of my chest. And then when I found out it was from those two, I just teared up. I was so honored. I don't even have a better word than honored to say how I felt. This was such a special gift. So thank you so much, Evie and Sarah. This is gorgeous, and I appreciate you both so much. I wish I could give you two the biggest hug possible, and I appreciate you two so much. This is absolutely stunning, though. As for books read in the month of October, there was one book I think I actually got to at the end of September, but I'm going to count it in October because I never mentioned it in a September wrap-up. But that is The Sleeper and the Spindle by Neil Gaiman. And I listened to this on audio. It was super short, like under an hour. So I checked it out through my library Libby app. And I liked it. It was just a fun little whimsical palate cleanser story. And it had a full cast. And the only thing is that you'll get to the end of the story and you'll want more. And it's almost impossible to talk about it in a way without, because it is like under an hour long. But it is worth your time if you like something whimsical and light and fairy tale-esque. So I enjoyed that. And then I did mention this already on the channel, but I read and finished Sons of Darkness by Gurab Mohanty. I have a review of this, a spoiler-free review, and I will have a spoiler-filled discussion coming up here in a couple of weeks here on my channel with Gurab Mohanty and Anita Gada and with Angie, the Bookaholic. So stay tuned for that. I'm really excited to talk with the author about his book and his process for writing. Obviously, Game of Thrones, George R.R. Martin was a huge influence in this story, and there's a little bit of First Law that you'll see as well. I understand Malazan might be an influence, but to be honest with you, that kind of went over my head a little bit. I could see it in maybe a couple of places, but for the most part, it is multi-POV. I did feel like I was a little bit at a disadvantage having not been familiar with the Mahabharata before reading this, which is why I'm so excited to discuss this with Philip and Angie and Anita, because all three of them are very familiar with the Mahabharata. So it was a bit of a slow start for me. It was a little hard to orient myself with a lot of the tertiary characters and a lot of the locations and things happening even in the plot. But it was pretty exciting. It did amp up quite a bit in the second half, and I'm very much looking forward to discussing this here on the channel. Next book to mention is a reread for me, which I listened to via audio and with the ebook, and that is Brahms' The Child Thief. And I will be in a discussion on this book for the Shelf Space Book Club. I'm so excited because I've been in Shelf Space since August, I think, 2020. So I'm really thrilled to finally get to be a co-host for a live show with Shelf Space. And we're going to be talking about this book with Leanne from Leanne's Library. And I think I already mentioned Evie on Evie's channel. So this book, it's interesting. I picked up the audiobook of this a year ago. So in October last year. And at the time I was moving into our house. And I remember feeling like I wasn't in much of an audiobook mood and that I almost quit. I almost quit about a quarter of the way through because I was having a hard time feeling fully connected to the story. And then I kept going. I kept pushing myself, especially because I kept going through a lot of insomnia at that time, adjusting to the new house. And so I kept waking up in the middle of the night with nothing to do. So I'd listen to a lot of the audiobook. And then I was surprised. I was surprised with what Brahm did with the story, and I ended up really enjoying it and being so glad that I finished it. Now, this time that I got to it, I felt pretty much the same way, which is a little surprising. I expected to enjoy it more. I don't think I really enjoyed it more than I did the first time. I feel like it was pretty much the same. There's something in the beats of the story that feel like a little off to me, and I can't figure out exactly what that is. There are flashback sequences of Peter's previous upbringing, but I don't think that bothered me. I actually enjoyed those parts of the story. There were parts of the story that kind of go more with the Arthurian legend influence in the story. So if you don't know, by the way, this is a Peter Pan retelling, but there are Arthurian parts to this. So instead of Neverland, we're going to Avalon, and there's the Lady of the Lake and, characters like that. So the thing is, I think some of the Arthurian stuff might have been a little bit difficult. Some of it I really liked, and some of it I could see how other people might not connect to it quite as much. Having just come off the Warlord Chronicles, I think helped me appreciate those parts more. But like I said, there was something in the beats of the story or in the pacing that just felt a little weird or a little off for me. And at the same time, there were so many elements I really enjoyed. And I especially, my favorite part of this story was the captain character. I love the reimagining of the captain in this story, but he doesn't come into play until at the last third or last quarter of the story. And I do have to say that my enjoyment of the story, I think, is largely due to the audiobook narrator, which is Kirby Hayborn. He does the most fantastic voices of each of the characters. His Peter character, his captain character, all the characters are just so well told through his voice. And so I do think that that enhanced my appreciation of the story. I am looking forward to discussing this with Evie and Leanne to hear what their thoughts are. And I'm sure they will probably have some criticisms, but overall, I'm really glad to have gotten to this again and just appreciate what Bram did with this very dark Peter Pan retelling. And so after that, I went into another very dark story, probably the darkest I've ever read, possibly the darkest I've ever read. And that is The Darkness That Comes Before by R. Scott Bakker. And I did do a review of this story, so you could check out my thoughts there. It is spoiler free. I just feel so conflicted because on the one hand, I was fascinated with this story. I mean, I was just turning the page. I wanted to go back to the story every chance I got. I was fascinated with the world. I was fascinated with the Holy War setup. I was fascinated with the character psychology. Just so many things at play. The battle scene in that book was one of the best I've ever read. Bakker's prose is phenomenal. And at the same time, I feel really uncomfortable just telling everybody, yes, read this, because there is such incredible misogyny and patriarchy in that world. And the treatment of women and lack of agency that they have it's horrible. I mean, yes, everybody in that world, like I said in my review, gets it bad. Everyone does. But just seeing what the women went through, and in my review, I talk about this, but I don't even feel like I scratched the surface. I didn't talk about half the brutality that actually happens to the women and what they encounter. So I say go into this very cautiously. This is the type of book that you don't go to for a whimsical escape. This is the type of book where you want to go into to confront the darkest parts of humanity. When you want to confront the darkest parts of your soul, this is the type of book that is made for that kind of experience, the dark shadow exploration. And I did appreciate the philosophy and themes. I am very curious to go on in the series, and actually, I may have started book 2. But anyway, I'm going to be talking about this over on Philip Chase's channel with Jimmy from the Fantasy Network and Raph Bluetext. And I have to say that Jimmy was probably the biggest influence on me wanting to pick this up, and Steve from Steve Talks Books, because I know Steve has been a huge fan of this trilogy as well. But anyway, I know there's a lot to say, a lot to unpack in this trilogy, and I have great appreciation for what Bakker has set up, and we'll see where it goes. After finishing Bakker, I did go into a little bit of a book hangover, but then I picked up The Fortress of the Pearl, which is book 2 in the Elric saga. And this is a story I have not read before. This was not in the original bind-up I read when I was a teen. This story was interesting because it did take me a while to get into it. I think that was more a me thing, more just having a book hangover thing from Bakker. And so it took me a little extra concentration to get into the story. But then once I got into it, I was pretty fascinated with the multiverse implications in here. And the way that dreams play a role in this. You get introduced to this concept of a dream thief, and just the narrative aspects of the story, the way that it unfolded, the way it took place with this whole journey, and kind of almost felt like a portal fantasy in a way. And then the way it all kind of came together at the end. I thought it was such a beautiful story arc. I don't know, there was just something graceful about it and just some gorgeous descriptions in it. So I know that Moorcock is known for being very dark and cynical. There were some cynical moments, some tragic moments, I think, to this story, but I really think there was also a lot of beauty to it too, and a lot of exploration on the nature of dreams and the nature of love and how these feelings that can seem so personal are actually part of a more universal fabric of reality. I don't know, there was something really bittersweet and beautiful about the way that was explored. And I'm really looking forward to discussing this in our group discussion because I just think he did something really special with this story. It did leave an impression on me. It left me just in awe. I did not expect that from an Elric read, but that was the case with The Fortress of the Pearl. So that's all I have to say about that for now. And now for some other channel highlights. I had Why Read episode 2 with the Page Chewing crew. So that's Steve Talks Books, P.L. Stewart, who is the author of A Drowned Kingdom, and Taylor from Made Between the Pages. And we had a fantastic time talking about what they do on Page Chewing with promoting Indian self-published authors. We talked about reading diversely. Taylor did a fantastic video about that, so we discussed that topic. We talked about coming of age stories and intersectionality, which is one of my favorite themes explored in literature. And so it was a wonderful time. I had such a good time talking with those three and have such respect and appreciation for what they do. And then I had Why Read episode 3 with Philip Chase and AP Canavan from A Critical Dragon. And wow, it got fiery in that episode. There were some fireballs thrown and in the best way possible, but man, it made me look back and think it's kind of the benefit of a live show that I don't filter my thoughts too much, but I did get some fiery messages back from Alan after that episode, and he talked about it a little bit on Chatting with Nuts last Friday. It was kind of funny. So anyway, it was fantastic though. I had a wonderful time. I had a fantastic time on both episodes, and it's always just such a pleasure to talk with different people in the community and to address this question of why we read instead of focusing on what we read and how much we read. So I really enjoy those discussions, and I'm excited to have more. I am still planning a couple of future episodes, so stay tuned for those. And then another discussion I was a part of, but not on my channel, on Derry's channel from Derry's Read It Before, was A Realm of the Elderlings Farseer trilogy discussion with Evie from She Was Only Evie. So the three of us talked about the famous scene at the end of Assassin's Quest. So it's full spoilers in that discussion. But wow, I probably shared some unpopular opinions in that discussion, but the way that we bounced ideas off each other, it really just made me appreciate what Robin Hobb does so much. It's like there are layers upon layers that you could peel back from that story and look at in different ways. And I'm thrilled to have those kinds of discussions. It just took my level of appreciation and perspective to a new level. That was such a pleasure and such an honor to be invited and get to talk about that in depth and to have different interpretations and to rethink the themes in that whole trilogy. That discussion actually got me to do that. Another highlight was being part of the wonderful Wars of Light and Shadow spoiler-free discussion and giveaway over on Philip Chase's channel last weekend. We were there with Jenny Wirtz talking with her, but it was of course with Philip, otherwise known as Chaser the Bard, AP Canavan from A Critical Dragon, otherwise known as Lord Fireballs, Newtman, who is Jimmy from the Fantasy Network, and myself, Jo Ariel with the Silent H. So we had a fantastic time, and it was just inspiring, especially learning the process that Janny had for the structure of the series and some of the intentions she had with sort of challenging reader assumptions. So definitely check that out. It was a fantastic discussion. I especially loved hearing her thoughts on the music magic that's present in that series as well. So I very much look forward to continuing the series and discussing it with that warband of sorts. So that about wraps up my October. I think my favorite book of the month is going to have to be The Darkness That Comes Before. It's not a world I'd want to live in, but I just was fascinated again with what Baker set up. And I'm looking forward to continuing on in that trilogy and seeing where it goes and having discussions about it. So that is all for now. Please let me know your favorite book of the month or what you thought about any of the books I mentioned, or if you're planning to read any of the books I mentioned. And thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.